meeting with you. Our tourism and marketing effort continues to chug along. Okay. So the tourism and marketing program continues to chug along fabulously. And you're going to see that today when Kristen reviews the numbers that in the PowerPoint we sent to you on Friday. And I'm also very pleased to say that economic development is continuing to move along at an even greater and faster pace since Janet came on board. And if I can pick one thing that I'm most proud of as of today, after 7 months in this position, is that I believe we are successfully, or we've successfully knocked down the silos that used to exist between tourism marketing and economic development. And we have adapted to an office full of staff who understand that there's a synergy that exists between tourism marketing and economic development. And if that synergy continues and we continue to grow that together as one program, that we will be much more successful than if the silos would have stayed in place. I think it's absolutely critical to the continued growth of Cumberland County. It's certainly important to the continued growth of CADIC, and it's the one thing that I think about a lot and I'm very, very proud of. Staff have really bought into that concept, and after many, many weeks of discussion in every single staff meeting, I don't see those silos anymore. There are a lot of other things that I could personally talk about in terms of what I've seen in the last 7 months, but I'm not going to do that because I'd like to get right to the PowerPoint that we have for you today. And we'll start with, you've already heard about our new hires, Janet and Mary. The next thing that we're going to try to get finished relatively soon is to hire the workforce development manager. We are finalizing a job description, which will be reviewed by Jesse McCree and other people who have a stake in workforce development, like Kentucky, who chairs our committee, and some other folks. And then we're going to move forward with that. Our strategic planning sessions continue. We're in toward the end of the second meeting for each of the 4 subcommittees. We'll be doing the third and final meeting in August, and then Monica Gould and her staff will put together the strategic plan that will result from those meetings. We're working very hard to define what the Alliance program is. I think there has been a lot of concern and question about what is the Alliance, CADIC Alliance, supposed to do? What's it supposed to be? How is it supposed to help the businesses? And we're working to address that and nail that down. And that is also part of the strategic plan. We're looking at succession planning for our board. We have members, like traditionally with most boards, there's turnover. We've had some turnover on our board in the last 6 months. We will have more come January 1st when some folks' terms run out, and we're working on that. We're also reviewing a software package. We'll do a final demo in that next week to do employee performance reviews, and it'll be much different software than what people are used to working with at CADIC, and it'll be performance and goal oriented. And then finally, on this slide, we talk about the new CADIC office needed. I can tell you that there are many issues with the office that we're currently in. We just had, before we left, had to put a bucket underneath somebody's ceiling tiles in an office because we have problems with constant leak, mold, mildew, things like that. So we're looking to find more suitable office accommodations We have a lease with the Borough of Carlisle that runs through December of 2023, but we're going to look at that and see what that looks like potentially a little bit sooner. A couple of issues that we've talked about before that still hanging fire. The Ag Discovery Center, we're waiting for an answer from the Pennsylvania Dairymen's Association. They kind of pushed back their decision until they got their 501c3 status, which is what they're working on now. Last conversation I had with Jill Gato, she's telling us that we should expect an answer by the end of this month. If you recall, it was supposed to be the end of June. Now she's saying by the end of this month. And also we're working really, really hard to grow our partnerships with the chambers. This is something that is another one of those things that I feel very strongly about. And I think everybody agrees that for us to succeed and for the chambers to succeed, KDIC and the chambers must work very closely. Now, there's certain lanes of traffic that the chambers will stay in, and there are certain lanes KDIC will stay in. But with any highway, those lanes intersect at times, and we're working very closely with them. I was able to broker a sponsorship agreement with each of the 4 chambers in the county, and Kristen is working on finalizing what that exactly will look like. But we will be giving the chambers each a dollar amount of money, and for that we will receive sponsorships and vice versa. So it's kind of a wash in the end. But we are working very closely with them every chance we get. In fact, we're planning to have a meeting with the chambers and all of their staffs very shortly, and we're going to be talking about running a program in the fall that they'd be involved in, and certain other projects that we're looking at. And the last thing that I quickly talk about before I turn it over to Janet is we just received notice on July 6th by the Department of Community Economic Development that we've been recertified by them, and that was something that I'm pretty proud of too. So that went through flawlessly, no hiccups, no burps, no problem with that whatsoever. Any questions on what I've offered up so far? All right, Janet's turn.
All right. Good afternoon. I will speak this afternoon about economic development and our efforts at KDIC to provide a forward look at our plans as well as for the future, while providing highlights from the PowerPoint presentation that you all received in advance. This quarter, we had 1 state-funded loan approved. We have had several inquiries about loans from state and local sources and have received 50 out of 50 performance rating for both the portfolio management and our underwriting from PETA. Working with various partners, we are trying to identify candidates for funding. So we are partnering in the community, and I'm going to talk a little more about our outreach in just a minute. We also are doing some review of best practices from other areas of the state and country to make sure that our lending tools are the best in class and serving our Cumberland businesses. KDIC has been recommended for an additional $50,000 for business lending, bringing our revolving loan fund through the Cumberland County Housing and Redevelopment Authority to over $400,000. We are in the process of preparing a campaign and outreach plan to spend those dollars with businesses and hope to get that out very soon. Given the current climate, it makes sense for our low interest loans to be of interest to local businesses. Staff is also reviewing and watching for federal and state opportunities for grants that may help establish things like revolving loan funds that will complement the work of the banks, not supplant their funding. Look for things that might help us with real estate development and other opportunities such as workforce development. Some of our economic development projects are on the slide before you. I will hit a few highlights. We did have 6 new redevelopment assistance capital program grants awarded. That's the RACP, resulting in 6 projects that total over $6.5 million. And this brings our total investment in Cumberland County to over $97,341,725. And that's through the 26 grants that created an estimate of 1,190 jobs. There was 38 million plus in direct and indirect investment from RACP in the county from new job creation, an increase in hotel tax revenues, real estate tax revenues, and business tourism. Continuing on our economic development projects, we anticipate a new round of RACPs soon and are already starting to identify projects that would be of interest to the RACP process. And we are working currently with 3 site selector projects. One is through the state governor's action team. 2 are straight site selectors. One was for workforce, and the second one was zoning, looking at zoning and utility information to determine whether they want to come to Cumberland County. Outreach is really key to what we are trying to do in economic development. It is really the cornerstone for expansion and retention. Cumberland County has 6,748 businesses, and we do intend to strategically identify and meet with businesses in industry sectors that are growing. Engage is one of the tools and ways that we will do our outreach. This is in partnership with the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development and our local economic development service providers, including Ben Franklin Partnership and others. We'll meet with businesses to talk to them about their needs in workforce development, business lending, international trade, innovation, entrepreneurship, and investments, to name a few. We are also outreaching, and Gary mentioned this a minute ago, to our alliance members to continue to support the needs of our larger businesses. And these are those that are investing here in Cumberland County in economic development and tourism through CADIC. We are doing a lot of municipal outreach to identify an inventory of sites for business expansion or attraction in areas where growth is not only permitted, but is in accordance with comprehensive planning. We're meeting with private sector service providers like banks, attorneys, accountants, real estate to find ways to build trust in what CADIC offers and to obtain referrals so that we can grow and expand businesses that are here, so that in the end we retain them. We're building relationships of cooperation and collaboration rather than duplication with our chambers of commerce and public sector partners. We're holding business meetings every day, from entrepreneurs to established businesses, to identify opportunities that help them to flourish and grow. There are 133,061 people employed by those 6,000 plus businesses that I mentioned earlier. Therefore, it's important to note that workforce is an important component of economic development. So we are, as Gary mentioned, about to post a position for a workforce manager to address those needs. In the area of the real estate collaborative, We have been working on a few things here. One is submitting a site for the Wawa development. You may have noted that there was recent advertisement or a promotion that they are looking in central Pennsylvania. And we not only shared that among site developers here, we also are looking at one of our sites for a location. And we're also dealing with issues surrounding the Tyco site. Under the Cumberland, York Area Local Defense Group, the county investment thus far is $602,000. We're beginning the closeout of contract number 3 of all of the funding, and one of the projects in that contract is the Post Road Steering Committee, of which both Kirk Stoner and I are members and participating in. So we look forward to what is able to be done in that area and growing the opportunities surrounding that and promoting safety. And with that, I will turn it over to Kristen to move into our tourism promotion.
Thank you. So I wanted to start today with a lodging data overview. Last time we came and presented to you, I only had access to January and February numbers. So I included what we have available today, which was March, April, and May. And that's comparing 2022 to 2021. I'm excited to see that all of those numbers are green. So our hotels are really performing well at our 3 main indicators of success, which is our occupancy, average daily rate, and then revenue per available room. But I think the second chart is the more promising one of the two, which shows year-to-date numbers, so that'd be through May for 2022 compared to 2021, but also compared to 2019, which had been our best year-to-date for these data points. So to see that we're almost at the same occupancy and above average daily rate and revenue before the pandemic, I think is really good news. It means our hotels are recovering, and that also directly resulted in March and April gross hotel tax receipts to our organization being higher than they were in 2019. So it's exciting to see that success for the hotels, but also to see that success coming back into our organization. Switching gears to our trails. So quickly, the Cumberland Valley Beer Trail is chugging along, I guess is the interesting turn of phrase. But we launched a new passport in April, and we have 30 locations participating. Again, with the passport, I have our signups and check-ins there. But I think the last bullet is the important one. Our top 3 origins for the signups for the beer trail are a local market and then Philly and DC, which is where we're promoting the beer trail. So happy to see that advertising is working. Our other new trail is the ice cream trail that is geared more towards families. We want to give an alternative option to promote other businesses and also a different option than just the beer trail. So we launched that in May with 17 locations. That's still going along, but going really well. And we're working on a new trail at the moment, a fall fun trail, which will launch this September. The partners on that trail will be our state parks, but also all of our farm attractions, and focus on fall foliage and you pick farms and things you can do with your family in the fall, hoping to promote that as a weekend getaway for families. Last time I was giving an update, I gave you a full breakdown of our advertising budget for the year, and now everything's in motion and in full swing. So I wanted to show you this is a sampling of the outlets that we are using for leisure advertising. Some you, I'm sure, recognize, and some you probably don't. But we're doing a lot of digital advertising. We're doing some video advertising on streaming services. So the Adara, Effect TV, Travel Spike, those are all companies that help you find the right demographic for those digital ads and those video streaming ads. Also wanted to show you a little bit of the creative behind this year's leisure advertising buy. So the first photo is my favorite. This is our Carvertise advertising. We wrap rideshare cars in DC and Baltimore promoting the beer trail, and they even have the rat cards that they can hand out to people that are using their services. The ad in the middle is an example of a beer trail ad, and then the final one there is one of our digital ads that you would see on targeted websites asking you to plan your weekend adventure. I mentioned this campaign is still running, but year to date, the numbers are coming back really, really positive. We're way up in sessions to our website directly from our advertising. We're way up in new users, which is also exciting because a lot of this advertising was aimed at brand awareness and trying to get new visitors interested in Cumberland Valley. So I'm excited to see that number so high. And then the third number there, also really high for actions. I included what we consider an action, and we've identified these because they show the next level of intent to travel to Cumberland Valley. So really excited to see all those up so high. There are two reasons that they probably are so high. One of them is that we did start a little earlier this year. We invested more this year, and we also refreshed all of the creative. So if people were seeing our ads again, they looked new and different. Also, last time I mentioned that we were working with a research company, Arrivalist. We hadn't done anything with them the first quarter of the year, but we're currently getting onboarded with this platform. So they use mobile tracking data to provide visitor demographics to visitors bureaus. And part of our onboarding process was them pulling old data and giving us a 2021 year in review. The purpose of this was just to kind of show us some of the data we're going to start having access to. And I wanted to give you a couple highlights today. So the big number there is 4.8 million arrivals. That means visitor. We did put a few qualifiers on what would make you a visitor to Cumberland County. You had to be traveling from over 50 miles away. You had to be in market for over 30 minutes. And their software has the ability to take out commuters and also take out people that are here for over 2 weeks. So they have some measures in place to make sure the data truly is a visitor. And this is just some of the information we can pull. So out of that 4.8 million, we can see what percentage are repeat, what percentage are staying more than 2 days. We can see which origin market is staying the longest. That is that random bullet for Idaho Falls. It's probably not a lot of people, but they did stay for more than 4 days. And the last two bullets I think are the most interesting. Our highest arrival day in 2021 was Friday. So to me, that supports the weekend getaway messaging we've been going after. And I was excited to see Philly and DC in our top 5 origin markets, because again, that's where we advertise. But already our team's been talking about seeing Wilkes-Barre Scranton there as an opportunity to maybe advertise weekend getaways to them. And I'm just going to assume that that market is a little more affordable than Philly and DC.
Are those in order? Anywhere?
They are in order.
They are.
Yep.
Wow.
What does spent in market mean?
The most time actually here.
So in market means the Cumberland Valley.
Correct. Yes, I see what you're saying.
So the average that a person comes here to visit, they spend an hour and 36 minutes.
It's also counting people that would just be coming in to go to one location and leave. So if somebody was driving over from Harrisburg into Cumberland, visiting one store and leaving,
Okay.
and that number is
Okay.
probably significantly
Okay.
higher, pulling that average
That's
down.
good to know.
Yes. Arrivalists can also show us our top arrival days for the year, and eventually we're going to be getting this data monthly. But this was really exciting exercise to do because they spit out these 3 random dates and we were able to investigate and see what they were. So the first one by a lot was the PIAA track and field meet down at Shippensburg University. So to me, that solidified our efforts in sports, the sports sales efforts, and also has led to us setting up a meeting with the athletic department at Shippensburg University. And then the next 2 highest arrival dates, which is probably not a surprise to anyone, were 2 of our car shows. So as we get our arms around this data and what we can share, we're really trying to accomplish 2 things. One of them is for us internally to make smarter, more strategic decisions when we put our advertising together next year, maybe going after markets that we haven't before but are showing up in the data, or maybe partnering with some other people to make an impact on the events that are already coming in that we weren't aware of before. But we're also hoping to be able to use this data to help our partners, whether that be top attractions like Carlisle Events, our colleges, our chambers, to really share data with them so they can understand who's coming in and out of their doors as well.
Are you using Arrivalist to track what goes on at the Cumberland Valley School District, PIAA?
Yes. So we are able to really geo-target specific locations. So we've set up, I think, 40 different locations in Cumberland County, including Cumberland Valley, including our colleges, including our downtowns, attractions, things like that. So yeah, we'll be able to look at individual locations as well.
For your origin markets, I didn't have a chance to look ahead here at all. Do we know how their ranking, how closely that correlates to the amount of advertising spent there? In other
Yes.
words, we know Philadelphia's are we spending the bulk of our dollars in Philadelphia? And that's
Yes.
why.
Yes,
And do the others correlate similarly? Or?
we're making educated guesses based on data and where we're advertising. But yeah, I'd say the biggest piece of our leisure advertising budget is Philly, followed by DC, and then followed by Baltimore, and then regional.
And the data that we're extracting from the arrival of software is going to really help make those types of decisions.
Yep. Thank you.
Switching to destination sales efforts, we continue to get some meeting prospects and some group tour motor coach business, which is nice to see that continuing to come back after the pandemic. We are actually today participating in a call with the state tourism office. They allocated $50,000 for group tour efforts for the state, and we want to make sure we're part of that discussion so that our interests in motor coach and group tour are part of how to spend that money. Looking at sports, that continues to be our biggest area, bringing in overnight. So we've had 2 meetings so far with the PIAA team, also with the Cumberland Valley team, to discuss how we can support them and what their roles are and what they would like to see. The biggest ask from them of our organization is to take the lead on hotels and restaurants. So from that, we're going to create a little task force of hotel partners or restaurateurs to really find a way to welcome those groups in and make sure that both of those groups are ready to welcome those groups. Also working on some swimming events and some softball events and just other sports that are looking to come into the area. Partner outreach, Janet mentioned, has been a big focus on economic development side, but it's also been a big focus on our tourism side, specifically for our sales efforts. So we've been really meeting weekly with partners, and there's a lot of new partners in our hotels and in our meeting venues. So our team's been taking time to meet with them, but also tour them around our towns and our other attractions so that they can make great recommendations. And when they're out doing their own sales efforts, they can speak to the whole destination, not just their hotel. Looking at our websites, I don't want to go into all these numbers, but for our tourism website and our economic development website, both of them continue to perform very well. I think the organic search sessions is the most impressive number here, because that means more and more people are either directly typing in the URL, so they know to go to our website, or that we have the right content on our website, that whatever they're searching for, we're coming up first or second, so they're clicking through that content as well. Speaking of that content, here's just a list of some new things we've been working on. On the tourism site, we republish a lot of old content with updated information so we can include new businesses. That's a great way to highlight new businesses and make sure they fit into existing content, but we're also publishing new content. So we have some things up there you'll see. And then on economic development, I mentioned last time that we're really looking to do more success stories. So we've had 3 new ones for the West Shore Theater, for Duck Donuts, and the King West Art Collaborative. And our marketing team is currently working on restructuring the content for the economic development website with the help and support of our new economic development team. So I'm super excited to have their expertise as we get that to be the best content it can. For our public relations efforts, in May, we were on Good Day PA talking about the beer trail, the launch of the new passport. We had an influencer that we hosted visit in June under the name Stays and Getaways. She did 2 videos that had over 150,000 views, highlighting Allenbury, that's where she stayed, and then Sports Emporium, some area restaurants and outdoor recreation. Published 7 news articles on our economic development website, really trying to focus on, to Gary's point, tying economic development to tourism. So you'll see some articles here on the importance of tourism to our economy, outdoor recreation's importance to our economy, and then we've obviously had some features on our new hires.
Do we showcase external media as well in there at all? Like great publicity we get.
Yes, these were I included some of the bigger highlights, but they were not included. All of those were also news releases that were sent out. And then the circulation number is all external circulation. Yeah. Our social media success, again, a lot of information here, but drawing your attention for tourism to our Facebook page. June was our highest number of new followers, like shares, comments, and impressions. So all of our metrics, it was the highest it had been for the year. We hit a milestone on Instagram for 5,000 followers in May. Instagram, we're taking a new approach, making more videos, which has resulted in 62,000 views, and also making more of an effort to do Instagram stories, which allows us to send people directly to partner accounts. So we've been getting a lot of great feedback from our partners, thanking us for sending people over to their pages as well. In economic development, the last 6 months, we increased our impressions on Facebook and LinkedIn a whole lot, and a lot of that is to the previous slide's success of new content, news articles. That gives us and feeds us more information to get more people involved in our social media. So our goal for the year for social media across the board has been engagement, and here's, I just included a couple ways we've been able to do that. And the first bullet, again, is a really good example of crossing over tourism and economic development. We went out and met with Duck Donuts on National Donut Day, got some great donut making content for our tourism side, but also did a nice story on the economic development site for them being headquartered here, why they're here, and their connection to the area. We're also using data that we have to show us our top pages to promote them on Facebook, which has led to a lot of success. And now that our team's out and about a lot more, we've been able to go to events like the Carlisle Ford Nationals and post in-time content, which usually performs really well because we're not posting it way before or way after the event. Our newsletters continue to be successful. We have 3 primary newsletters. Our partner newsletter, which we continue to send out weekly, and we're going to continue to do so because these numbers keep going up. So in June, we had our highest open rate and click-through rate for the partner newsletter ever. So to me, that says our partners are still seeing value in us sending out weekly content. We're finding the right information to send to them. And then our visitor newsletter and our Bureau Trail newsletter that we send out monthly, those open rates are also seeing increases. So happy to see that those are getting to the right audience. And then finally, for visitor services, gave you all a copy of our new Cumberland Valley Travel Magazine. The second quarter was the first full quarter we were able to distribute those because of printing delays, but we got out 35,000 copies so far. Also saw a big increase in people requesting the visitor's guide on our website, so that was nice to see. We're sending out individual copies for people that sign up on our website for those. And then a new update on our visitor center here in downtown Carlisle. We've been working with a new executive director at the Cumberland County Historical Society. He gave us some more visible space next to History on High, kind of in the front. So we have window display space as a test run he's doing. He's also has some interns for the summer testing out extended hours of operation and some weekend hours. And by that last bullet, you can see that's already working because the second quarter visitation was the highest we've ever seen in our visitor center since 2016.
This is the guide?
Yes. Yep.
So they call it an order. Do we make a digital copy available online?
Yep.
A really nice guy.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, did a nice job on that.
Yeah, and these they are in all of our hotels, and then we also have targeted areas in Philadelphia to make sure they're in those around turnpike stops, 81 stops, as many places as we can get those. They are.
So we're gonna give Mary a pass today, but we'll leave next time. Yeah, next time. She'll be here to talk. I certainly want to answer your questions, but first I want to just end with this. We really appreciate your support. I mean that sincerely. I've talked to each of you many times in the last 7 months, and you've given us support that has been tremendously helpful, and I thank you for that. We're not anywhere close to being done doing what we need to do. We got a lot of work to do. We all know that, and we're all prepared to do that. We've identified 6 things that we think, I'll call it kind of low-hanging fruit and things that we can accomplish in the immediate future. And this is what we're going to strive to do in the next month or so. And those things are a real deep dive into the budget. We need to take a hard look at that. We had, as you know from conversations you've had with me, I've had some concerns about how the budget prep was done in previous years prior to any of our time here. And we're going to take a deep dive into that. And Mary has already started that. We're going to take a real close look at that. We're also going to continue to hammer away at the contacts with the local businesses to get Cadix's name back out there. So everybody knows that we're alive, well, and prepared to help in any way we can. I think we're already doing a great deal of that. Maybe I didn't express that enough in previous meetings, but we got a lot more to do, and we need some staff to be some additional staff to be able to do that. The next thing is we need to get some money on the street to these businesses, and we're looking at doing that in a number of ways. We want to talk, and we're going to have discussions internally before we present it to the finance committee about a micro lending package that will assist the very small businesses in the county that we think are very important to us, and we want to reach out to them with these micro lending, either grants or loans. And when I say small, give you an example. We have one business that came to us and said, "Look, we only need 10,000 back. We don't want to apply for 50. We only need 10,000." Well, that's in my mind micro lending, and we should be able to accommodate those small businesses, and that's what we're looking at. Hiring a workforce development director is critical. We got to get moving with that. There's just such a tremendous need. Just like you, every time I go somewhere in the county, there's a help wanted sign. And they're everywhere. I've talked to a number of business owners who all say the same thing. People don't even show up for interviews. People show up for interviews, they get the job, then they don't show up to start work. We had a discussion yesterday with Eric Saunders at New Hope Ministry. Jan and I had a long discussion with him about the program that they run and how we can work with New Hope to work with some of their guests to get them not just hired, but to work toward progressing them through from a bare bones entry level position to promotions within that same organization. So there's a workforce planning initiative that's so important to us that we need to get moving on. The board succession planning, and I mentioned earlier, that's critical, and that's low hanging fruit that we're going to be addressing, as well as the alliance membership. So those are the 6 things that we're really focusing on right now. I think we are making progress. We're just not making it quick enough and to make me happy and probably a lot of other people, but we'll get there, and we have plans to add additional staff. We need to do that. We have some, I mean, Janet can't do the whole economic development program on her own. It's impossible with what we're asking her to do. So we need to get these staff hired and get them out in the field in discussions with these businesses and things like that. And with that said, I'll stop there and answer any questions that you might have.
Ladies first.
Ladies first.
So, Mary, I'm really interested to see your deep dive into the budget, because one of the things that has frustrated me about CADIC is that I could never really tell how much was being spent and what it was being spent on. That has been a conundrum for me. One of the things that I really thought about when we were looking at this material today on destination sales and our social media and our tourism is I really would like to know how many dollars were spent on each piece of this and what are we getting out of it. And so I'm interested in what you discover. That will be very important to me. The rest of it, I really have to, I jotted down some notes, but I haven't come up with I haven't formulated the questions yet. I know that there are some things I want to ask, but I really want to get those questions together, but I'll get them over to you then.
Okay. No problem.
Yeah, first of all, wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
My 6.5 years being here, I've never had any concerns or issues with the tourism side. I think CADIC has always been top-notch on that. The concerns have been more on the economic development. We seem to constantly be looking at new strategies, et cetera, et cetera. And until you got here, Gary, that's, to me, in my view, is how it was. You have turned that boat into the right direction, and I thank you for that.
Thank you.
And some of the stuff I'm hearing here, growing partnerships with their chambers, review of best practices. These are the things we should be doing. I'm really glad to hear that. One thing I wanted to ask, there's CADIC and there's CREDIC. Do we work with them? Do we look at them as an ally, not an ally?
So I will candidly tell you that the relationship with them was not very good for a long time. However, they have new leadership. We have new leadership, and I won't say it's a partnership yet. I'm not there yet, but we're working very closely with them. Ryan Unger is very easy to deal with. And we're working very closely with Melissa Stone, who is their Vice President of Economic Development. And I was able to get Janet a seat on the SEDS steering committee, and she's attending other meetings. And I would say that our relationship with them right now is better than it has been in years. And I hope that that continues that way.
Two other questions, and one is for the new location. You guys definitely need a new location, and you don't have to answer this question now, but do we have an idea of what the square footage needs would be?
No, we don't. And let me just tell you that the board is planning on appointing a 2, 3, or 4 person task force to work with us on that. We'll flush that out. We do know, we have a wish list already with that
Right.
put together, but we don't have any square footage or anything.
Okay, and can I get a list of all the committees and the people on those committees?
Oh, sure.
Or if they're on your website, I'll do it myself.
No, that's not on the website, but I have a copy in my office.
And I will have some other questions I'll have to formulate, but that's all I have for now. Thank you again for the information in the presentation.
I'll echo some of the comments made earlier. Gary, thank you very much for the job you've done here. We've been a little unsettled, and of course, we've had the pandemic and a number of organizational issues we've had to work through over time. So we've made incredible progress. I applaud the progress you've made. Looks like we're assembling a great team. That's what we need. We got it once. We're going to get it back. So continued momentum, very much appreciated. I understand you're used to the term impatience, but I think made incredible strides. Pretty incredible time period. So a lot of thanks to the new folks as well, and some not so new. Stars are shining.
So I got to say, and I said this every chance I get, the staff is incredible. They really are. We got some great people working there. We've got, Kristen has been just a godsend to me from the day I walked in the front door. Lori as well. And you heard me say that yesterday. Kristen's staff is doing fabulous work. And now with Janet and Mary there, we're gonna kick some butt and get some other people hired. Be in good shape, and I'll pass the baton off to somebody and right into the sunset. Be very happy and proud
I've
of.
tried that a few times already.
Yeah, I know.
Never one or two questions though. On the lending and finance, you mentioned about the loan portfolio, and it's evident that some of these have long lead times. So those kind of leading indicators will tell us a lot about the condition of our regional market as well as the national economy. So are we seeing any signs of slowdown in there? Anything that would give us an indication of what the next 6 months looks like?
On our lending and finance, we're seeing an uptick.
Uptick.
And the biggest reason is interest rates at the bank. So as they increase, our low interest loans Now, that said, we do need, as Gary mentioned, to look at the lending, because a loan of $50,000 is unreachable for some businesses. So we need to look at that, and the micro lending really makes a lot of sense for those folks.
We met with Mary Coon and Chris Rafferty this morning about the CDBG money. It's hard to lend. It's very, very hard for anybody who's gonna meet the requirements for that willingly. So that pot of money is sitting there, and we may not be able to lend it. We need to find money that we can lend without all of these restrictions and not having to pay prevailing wage and meet all of these federal requirements.
With those funds, we'll need to be strategic in the way that we market them, because you want to minimize those restrictions so that you get the money out, but make sure that you're doing the right things with the funds.
One of the things I've noticed recently, because I've participated in almost all of the committee task force meetings for planning, is that we've really gotten a good crew there as well. So as you say, it starts with the people. So you got good staff. We're really looking, I think, at significant upgrade in the stature capabilities of our board members. And we're using the committee system as a feeder for that. So we're populating that with good. I think we're made a lot of progress toward really professionalizing that function. And in doing so, that in itself attracts just a higher grade of individuals who want to be part of what's happening here. So I think we're going to see a lot of good things going forward. We need to ensure that we're, some of these new folks, we need to ensure that we're putting them to work, early on, and that we continue keeping that pipeline open. Or prospecting never really stops. And that we, frankly, set a high standard for them. I had some discussion this week regarding one or two names that came forward. Are they really what we're looking for? So that's productive, I think. So we keep our standards high, ensure the organization is something that people really want to belong to, get things done, continue working with all these partnerships that you've mentioned. You've been very spectacular in doing the outreach. We had an opportunity there, I think, about with the Create folks, new leadership there. It's an opportunity to see if they're going to kind of change their direction. And, that's great promise. So we're on the right path. We've gotten there through a lot of hard work by a lot of people. Kudos to all of you. And Gary, thank you again for once again being a key element of what we're trying to do here in Cumberland County. The one specific question, as part of the strategic planning we were doing with small business and innovation, that was the first contact I've had in a long time with Robin. I can't remember her name, from the Small Business Development Center.
Bergner.
Yes. Do we have, I think we would really benefit by making that partnership. You mentioned with micro lending, that right away, small business development council comes to mind. So I would like to see us at least consider whether there's a more permanent role rather than just a limited term task force for her. And maybe microlending is one of those areas, but if we want to give her a permanent committee assignment or look at her as a prospective board seat, I think that would be very welcome from them and provide us a stronger partnership with that area of the county that we perhaps haven't had in the past. So, but a lot of good people on those committees. And we want to keep them engaged. I'm a little concerned. Policy and planning has not been meeting. I realize that's because the plan's in development, but we put a stellar effort into recruiting top-notch people that we need to make sure they have something to do in the meantime, or that they get an opportunity to look at the work that's in progress on the plan itself. So, so we hang on to those people.
I did talk to Monica about doing a kind of update to those types of folks, policy planning committee, all board members, commissioners, things like that. And she's going to work on that when she gets back.
That's right. She's where?
Thailand.
Oh, very nice. Okay. I have no other questions. I'm just, some questions hanging around real estate collaborative. I know we got some decisions to make.
Yeah.
But, Other than that, very, very nice presentation. The tourism numbers especially really are, I'm really impressed with how we've upgraded at least the reporting of what's coming out of there. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And
Be a lot more
Set a high
transparency in the future.
I know. Yeah.
sorry,
There'll be a lot more transparency than there was.
good. Yes.
Used to be.
All right. Any other questions? All right.
All right,
Thanks.
get out of here.
Folks.
Go back to the basement. Her ceiling. Leaking crazy.
Again,
Again, you just put all new
No,
ceiling
we're not
tiles in
there.
one last,
It's Monday.
yeah,
But it was Monday, right?
Yeah.
So I can't remember what day it was now.
Yeah.
It was Monday.
yeah, she had put a bucket there before we left
Oh,
because
man.
it's like dripping. And they take the tiles out, the pipes are bone dry.
I have a little trouble understanding why Carlisle's Borough Hall, of all places, apparently doesn't meet an occupancy standard. They expect everybody else to adhere to, so we hope there'd be some conversation with them about it.
Great here.
All right. Thank
Get
you.
the house.
Thank you.
See you guys. Take care.
Okay, very good. We have our second act for today. That is the status update regarding suggested investment policy revisions. So taking the lead on this. but-
Yeah, you have your dynamic duo, your COO and your CFO here to provide a brief, we won't keep you long, brief kind of sort of status update of where the team has been. So if you recall earlier this year, Kelly Niederer, our county treasurer, actually provided a status update on where the team, and so the team has been our CFO, the first deputy and second deputy in the controller's office, and our county treasurer, coming together to review the investment policy. And at that previous meeting, there was a discussion of several of the changes as well as sort of the direction we were moving in. And here we are, kind of giving you an update on the current status. So the work has continued. And what we'd like to do today, sort of a laundry list here, we want to point out a few of the changes that have been made, that changes of note, discuss areas where there are some opinions and recommendations that differ amongst the team, and share our proposed next steps with all of you so that we can finalize the policy and for your review and approval. And then finally, receive any feedback to ensure that we're really moving in the right direction. We can take that back to the team and get the additional changes made. So Dana is actually going to be handling the discussion of changes. And I believe, do we have anybody from the controller's office online? I wasn't sure if they were going to join.
I hadn't engaged with Bob.
Oh, it was just Mike. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Nobody.
Okay, so, the team have, 2/3 of the team is here who's been reviewing it. They can certainly answer any questions, and we can certainly take any additional questions back and get some updates for you. But before I turn it over to Dana to provide a more in-depth discussion, I want to point out just a few things. First of all, in section 3, objective, there is a new paragraph there on legality. Jen Hipp, our assistant solicitor, has been reviewing from time to time various versions of this, and we will engage with her in the coming days to have her make sure that she's seen the latest iterations and provide any feedback. Also, if you'll note in section 4, responsibility and authority, parties involved. There are some substantial changes to the parties involved from the last version of this document that had been approved to this draft version. And I want to mention just a few of those changes. One thing you may note if you've compared the two documents and Commissioner DiFilippo, you asked me about some of these questions, so I know you've reviewed the list, that there was a finance or fiscal analyst. That work is done by an individual in the finance office. And so that was actually replaced with finance office, because really it is the finance office, whether it's an accountant or another member of staff that is providing those services. And it was just more clear to provide the broader description of that. And then also, if you look to that 2006 document, there is a Cumberland County Investment Board. That is no longer in this document. And the rationale for that is Section 5, Roman numeral Section 5, Paragraph 5, enumerates all of the security types and really provides a robust guideline for anybody who is designated as the fiscal analyst in the finance office. And so there was a general discussion amongst the group that that board was no longer needed. Now, the flip side of that group was really more of an operational service. And Dana and I have been discussing this over the last couple of days, and we do believe that between the two of us, that we would consult with the treasurer and the controller with anything that really would need to come before the Board of Commissioners to be approved, that it would come to the 3-member board as opposed to an investment board. So we don't need any answers on that today, but I just wanted to point out that was why that those the parties involved have changed from that original list. And without further ado, I'm going to actually turn it over to Dana to discuss some of the additional changes.
So for the most part, the wording throughout the document and the formatting has changed substantially. But I think we just further clarified what was in it or adjusted it to our actual practice. Because and so a lot of it just goes back to it, we just enhanced it further into what we actually do, as opposed to a policy that we never look at. So this is going to become more viable, for lack of a better word. If you go to Section 5, investment parameters, I think that this is probably where we expanded the most. Under Section 3, proposals, it talks about the finance office staff soliciting the 3 proposals, and we added, if we have an investment broker or advisor, that the controller's office, the treasurer's office, the finance office would all review the quotes that we get from them and present it to the commissioners for a final review from the commissioners. I think that's an important control, and that gets us to under the diversification. Once we get into that, the board at that time could decide what they do or do not want to invest in further. So even if it's in this policy that we may do it, we may never do it if the board never approves it, because for the most part, unless we use an advisor or a broker, finance is not going to enter into, say, mortgage-backed securities or commercial paper. We're going to do the standard certificates of deposits and certificates of deposits, money market accounts, but we're not going to go into those other types of investments without a broker or an advisor. And so I think an important control is the commissioners will always have final say on that. And that's when they could determine, no, I don't like mortgage-backed securities. I don't want them to be part of the request for proposals.
So are they legally permitted now?
Yes.
Mortgage back?
Yes.
Yes.
So they would remain here.
They could remain there, or we
Commercial paper
could
would
take them
remain
out.
here.
Correct. And we could take them out if the commissioner's not comfortable at all with having those in. But just because they're in here doesn't mean that we will invest. And if we do, it's still the Board of Commissioners' choice.
I'm fine with leaving them.
Yeah, as long as we have an advisor, because, especially in recent years, a lot of these instruments have hybridized to a large degree, where they're kind of cloaked in terms of what they're in is not what you think they're in. So we definitely want somebody who's, this is their real value to understand what it is we're putting our money on.
And when I'm looking over this list on a very side note, under the certificates of deposits, when I accepted all the changes, I must have not accepted the change on the certificates of deposit. It says 30% max in any one bank. That should be 40% to tie to the 40% below. And I think we discussed that at length in our last meeting. And the reason for that is when the county is getting a lot of cash in, it's very hard to diversify beyond 3 banks.
Right.
And so that 40% is important to us. We normally do no more than 30 to 35, but there are times that we get into issues where we can't diversify enough quick enough.
I would say now would be one of those.
Correct.
You have a range on this though, right? Not just a target number.
Yeah, well, and it's an average of 40% for the month.
All right.
Right, but this says at the top, it's maximum with one entity at the time of purchase. So we may know we have something coming due in 2 weeks.
Right.
And if we, at the time of purchase, already are extended beyond the 40%, we wouldn't be able to invest, and taking it down to 30% would cause more issues. And a lot of times, we only have 3 banks that are even in the market. So
I would just be cautious about putting too much emphasis on quantitative diversity of institutions, because they all have to adhere to the same
correct.
safeguards. They all have to provide FDIC as well as the additional collateralization that's required. So, there's risk there with institutional concentration, but it's small risk compared to some of the other.
So I would be happy to make that 50%. It makes our life
I
even
take
easier.
exception to that, Gary, with small banking institutions, because I think when I first arrived here, we were in violation of not just the policy, but of the code. And we had too much in a very small or financial institution than should have been placed there.
I'm sorry. So I understand what you're saying with it.
Yeah, so like I think you were saying that all institutions aren't created equal. While they all may be able to safeguard our deposits with collateral, we have limitations on when it comes to the amount of money we have in a very small financial institution, meaning a $500 million bank. We should not have $20 million in a $500 million bank.
So a tiered system, perhaps.
Yeah, and so now we're working with the treasurer when there's a smaller bank or something shifts in the bank, she lets us know and we don't invest it more in that bank.
It's actually, I think, in county code that there's a cap as to how much we can actually place as a part of in a financial institution. It's under certificates of deposit. It's in the vast majority of the institutions we're dealing with, it's not relevant, but there are a few here and there where they're small.
And that is now also covered under permitted investments. It's spelled out in our policy. So that is one of the very important acts. And I think it is our basically the Bible of the investments for Cumberland County going forward. And it does, I think we can all live in this policy and manage this policy very easily.
So how much of the change is simply that what we were doing wasn't reflected in an obsolete written policy versus what has actually been redefined?
I think that the biggest part, probably the biggest thing is adding in additional things that we've always been allowed to invest in, but we did
Okay.
not. So I think that's probably the biggest.
So they weren't listed in the agreement and in the old obsolete agreement, but we also weren't using them.
Correct.
All right.
But it became an issue, Gary, excuse me. for
That's
jumping in.
fine.
I just spent a fair amount of time on this. It became an issue when we began to work with Pliget. I had them review our old, because of the way Pliget functions, they have the pools. And I didn't know exactly what was in all of the pools. And when we opened accounts there, I wanted to make sure we were not in violation of the old agreement as it related to what they were investing in. Not that we were investing in directly, but that it was in the pool. So we were not So we began the relationship with Liggett, but throughout that process, there are opportunities, especially once we started to receive larger dollar amounts where you were considering, where you kind of have to look at considering maybe some individual portfolio management on maybe a longer term basis if things are sticking around a little bit longer. So they, we were fine. There was nothing invested in things that were outside of that policy, but we were certainly missing a number of things. If we would move to more of a portfolio management to give the investment manager more options. So, and that's one thing too that I think should also, we wouldn't put it in this policy, but if you engage with an investment manager, they would also establish a separate investment policy statement as to what you were trying to achieve with that specific fund. So, for example, if we were to take art money and say, we know we're not going to be distributing, for example, 25 million of that within the next 6 months. I mean, it's a very volatile rate environment right now. What could you do with 25 million over 6 months? They would know not to go in long-term mortgage backs because their policy statement is going to say they're going to need this money in 6 months. We need to, drive it to that. So our policy is definitely important for the way we function, but should an investment advisor ever be used, there would also be a separate investment policy statement, which ultimately would give the commissioners the authority to accept or reject any of what they were proposing on managing in those funds.
So 2 questions. When did the county get away from requiring 1-for-1 collateralization? Because it used to be we didn't do any pooled collateralization.
Yeah, banks virtually refuse to do that because it ties their hands too much, and if we had that requirement, we would have much less opportunity to invest with banks, and some, quite frankly, wouldn't deal with us at all. Others would deal with us, but it would be at a very, very, very low return because it's a painful thing to do. Many of them that we're seeing on collateral are actually using, which they're completely permitted, Federal Home Loan Bank letters of credit to collateralize our deposits, meaning they assign to us a letter of credit with the Federal Home Loan Bank that they are a part of, that if there's a default, we just get the money from the Federal Home Loan Bank to make up essentially for our deposits.
Okay, second question, going back to the size of the institution question. So the smaller institutions, are we aware of what limitations they are imposing upon themselves or the federal government has imposed on them most of them, if they're too small to take on they will say so, and they will make that point, and several have.
Some will, some won't. I don't know that they're aware of our requirement as it relates to, it's a very convoluted savings calculation for certificates of deposit. And when I was running it, it really came down to one institution that we deal with. And it's a level that is higher than anybody, even on the surface, would say they feel comfortable with at that level. I don't know that they're aware of the county code requirement, and I would venture to bet that they are not. But the larger banks, we have no risk in this market to that. And I think it's just good to keep on our radar that we kind of have a $500 million threshold in the bank when you're talking about banks that reasonably can service. think that's almost an easier way to look at it.
Okay. Thank you.
And Stacy and I were talking this morning also, and I think we'd like to add some information in the glossary, just defining there's a lot of initials in here. I think we wanted to further define those initials.
We've had conversations about acronyms over the last 2.5 years, haven't we? We really want to make sure that that's defined so that it's clear for everyone.
We talked yesterday about even that term investment manager needs to have.
Yes, and that's one of the things that we need to do. I've started going through the document, and I searched, and there were 3 different, it was finance department, finance, or finance office. And I was going through and I was making it all finance office, and we really need to do that with several of the other terms. It's really hard when you're taking a document that's first written in 2003, updated in 2006, and now, you have more updates to it. It really takes until you have that final draft to really make sure you're going through and equalizing all of the terminology that's being used. But yes, that is one that's on my list.
Next step, you want to talk about the next?
Yeah,
step?
so really what we would like to do is actually reach out to GFOA, and we actually haven't had a chance to, we met this morning and then we went into meetings until now. We like to reach out to GFOA, followed by potentially CCAP, and then also talk with both the controller's office and the treasurer's office, talk to Kelly, about any organizations and any resources they would provide to review the policy to make sure that, best management practices exist throughout the document before bringing it back for a final review.
One thing I missed, Stacy,
Oh, sure.
I know one of the correspondence, it was referenced that PFM, you were thinking to coordinate with PFM. The gentleman that I had worked with on this was Brian Senker, who I thought was Liggett, but in fact is listed as managing director of PFM. So,
Okay.
they had actually provided quite a bit of insight into this draft. So, and they were happy to do that as we were working through establishing the vision.
Did they see the document in entirety?
Yes. Yes.
When do you anticipate we'll see this again?
I think my hope would be maybe by the next workshop BOC, but it really just depends on how quickly somebody from GFOA is able to meet and discuss and review. But I don't think it will be a terribly long period of time.
I think if anything, they'll say it may be a bit of overkill, it may be a bit wordy, but I would be surprised if they offered any material changes. But you can certainly
I
check.
venture it's probably better than if you saw investment policies, if they exist, in writing from other counties. This is probably a lot more stringent, a lot more robust than what a lot of counties have in Pennsylvania.
If this is adopted, my guess is several counties suddenly would begin having very similar investment policies. We do like to borrow from our counterparts, right? If it works, it works. Let's use it.
The only thing that I would, it's funny because treasurers will occasionally ask, can you share your investment policy? But I do find that so many of them are set up so differently with how they function that this document now actually delineates the functions of my office, of Dana's office, in a very specific way as it relates to how in Cumberland County investments are managed. And that was not present in the prior policy. And it may not be, necessary for small counties. But
So when would the question of selling on an investment advisor, at what stage would that be addressed?
An investment advisor or somebody to review the policy?
How about both?
Okay, so the policy, I think if you give us the direction that we're okay, we can start working on somebody to review it.
That's what you're talking about, GFOA.
Mhm.
Yes.
CCAP, right,
The advisor or the manager or
right.
the broker, it would be when we have a large sum of money that we want to invest for 6 months, a year,
Okay,
that kind of thing, and we would want to deviate from money markets, CDs, and that kind of thing. I think in the market right now, it's a good time to look at those things. Sometimes we are doing just as good in CDs that we could do anywhere else, but that's not right now.
I guess what I'm getting at is, I would like to have investment professional look at the various classes, asset classes, and give us more detailed information on relative risk. So that we know, yes, we can go into this, but we know dollar for dollar, there's gonna be, the standard deviation a little higher on this one. So we can make those type of risk to reward
So I think that
judgments.
that would happen when you're trying to enter into an investment for a set period of time. They would also come in and talk about the risks. And I would hope that's what they would do, because each investment opportunity is gonna be very different. Somebody may
Right.
come in and just say, we're gonna invest in government securities and here's your yield. And somebody else may say, I'm gonna invest in these 4 different things and here's your yield, and that's probably gonna be higher, right? But it's gonna be a higher risk. And so they should be talking about that when they're presenting their proposal to us.
Well, it's a very competitive field though, and as you know, people will tend to use the information that reflects to their benefit the most. So I guess what I'm looking for for instance, as a class, I'm not wild at the government being involved in mortgage-backed securities, and it may be that it's legally permissible. But I want to have more concrete information on what's the additional level of risk, historically speaking, that I'm going to assume to do that.
Gary, again, I think that would be really hard for them to say point blank, because what you would be looking at if you even entertained a mortgage back in a portfolio, there's a requirement that counties are permitted, and I have the act under Act 10, but they need a debt rating of A. But many advisors say that's not good enough. You need to know more than what that just debt rating is. I need to know the underlying collateral, or what it's actually the mortgage backed is on. So I think because what governments are permitted to invest in is so narrow, that they're going to say, well, your risk is already off the bat really relatively limited. But I don't know that they could give you one answer that would satisfy you for that.
For the purpose of putting together the policy.
For the
If I'm
policy.
hearing you correctly, Gary, you'd like to have this information for the purpose of putting together the policy. And I don't know that that applies to the policy, because if it was determined by the group, hey, we want to get into something, let's say it's a mortgage-backed security, we are in the policy, it says we can do it because the code says we can do it, but we would then have the investment advisor come in and go, okay, this is why you shouldn't do this. I mean, that would happen at the time, and that would always kind of be in flux, right? It would depend upon all kinds of different financial qualities, right, in the state of the economy as to whether or not you would do that. Like, to put that in the policy now, it seems like we would always constantly be updating it.
I just don't think you could. I don't think you could say, well, this is going to be a risk of this amount.
Right.
Yeah, that's not at all what I asked for. So I'm looking for historical information on asset classes, which I understand what you're saying. Been investing personally since 1987, okay? Every risk initiative is unique for a whole variety of factors, so we're certainly going to look at that. But I know there are certain things that just you don't want to get in, and there's not so distant history in which banks got into things because the law said they could, and maybe they shouldn't have. So just because you can doesn't mean you should. So I think the question in play here is how much analysis takes place on the individual investment as it should, versus what's the pre-work you can do to say, we're not necessarily comfortable as a county in going into one or particular classes, because not everybody who sits in these chairs or that chair is really going to be that savvy in this field, and they may not even know who to ask when that moment arrives.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of when you implement a policy, to my way of thinking is you're not just protecting yourself for the moment. The policy is what people are going to build on in the future too. So you have an obligation to look at prospective risk going forward as well, to the extent you can. Understanding again, every individual investment has its own unique, the timing of it, the market conditions of it, the state of that industry, et cetera. So,
That's what the policy is doing, right? I mean, when I read it, it's preparing for that, right? It's setting it up saying, these are the things that under code you could do. You don't have to do them, and you have to do your due diligence before you make the investment. I mean, when I look at the policy, that's what I'm seeing happening.
That is,
That was my intent, but,
Yeah.
but Gary, I know that for example, Mike Clapsaddle had a strong concern, and it's kind of where this ended as it relates to me trying to advance it and meeting with Stacy. He was getting very specific about saying we had to hold all investments to maturity. I don't think you can you can make a statement like that, because if you have a bond and it's called early, it's not holding it to the maturity. Or if you have an investment manager and they choose to sell something early because they can do it at a premium.
right, that's the secondary market.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to have that in, and we wouldn't want to dictate what happens in a rising rate environment or a falling rate environment, like get too far into what we would be telling the investment manager to do. But I certainly will consider if there's any way to incorporate a risk factor to this. I think the way you do that is through the amount that you're permitted, which is now 30%, if at all. Like if you're doing any money, it would be 30% of your investables. So that's minimizing it. And I think by the sheer requirement that it has to be an A, and by your timeline would dictate if you would even go into a mortgage back. Any investor worth their salt, and you would be making that decision as to which investment advisor you would be selecting of at a minimum 3 that would be proposed to you, would be from people that we currently have relationships with, that we currently have worked with either through, Dana at blanking out on M&T's bond side, or PFM, or quite frankly, the folks that run the fixed income side for the pension. McKee is, CS McKee has been interested in trying to help with the portfolio. And they have a great breadth of knowledge with fixed investments that are all within our wheelhouse. So I think that I will think on it more, and we can certainly ask around if there's more ways to incorporate some assessment of risk, but I honestly at this juncture can't come up with one. But
Let's wait and see what GFOA in particular has to say. I think that'll be useful. And I'm not picking on any specific asset class. My premise is that just because it's allowable by law does not necessarily mean that it automatically should go into policy. So.
Oh, great. And you can, and I said to Dana and Mike on occasions, if they want to strike it entirely, you can strike it. All it does is limit you. It doesn't limit you. It limits the investment advisor as to what they can do, and it may potentially limit your yield. And that's fine. You can still have it in the policy. And if you do an IPS for a 6-month time period, you can say to them, we don't want anything to do with that. But to your point, policies survive you, me, and all of us in the room, potentially. And you have to write them such that, the things are covered.
That's all I have for now.
So you want to know if we want you to move forward with this?
Yes.
My answer is yes.
Okay. All right, so we will provide some updates as time goes on of where we are, and then certainly before it comes back before you, will provide, hopefully the final contract for your final, final.
No crypto,
Sorry.
no crypto, no cryptocurrency, no Bitcoin,
I don't think we're allowed.
not today,
It's not
but
permitted.
not yet. Not yet. But there's a lot of governments that are going far down that path of trying to create one, and then, of course, the last few months have taught them a hard lesson, so.
And Columbia wants one.
Various states will.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay, that's everything you guys have? Okay, excellent. Okay, that completes the item 4 topics for discussion. We'll move to item 5, other business, anything that's not on the agenda. Everybody wish to bring? Okay, good, very good. So with that, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
To adjourn.
Stand adjourned. Thank you all.